we're going to take a look at decimals. Now in the past we've seen that fractions can be used to represent part of a number. Well, decimals is just another way to do that. So I think we've all seen decimals in the past, so let's take a look at something like 52.16. All right, so the part after the decimal point is the part of the number, kind of like we don't have a whole number, we just have a piece of it. Now it's really closely related to the way that we count numbers to the left. Like when we go this way, the 2 is in the ones position, the 5 would be in the tens position, the next one would be the hundreds, and then the thousands. Well, we do the same thing as we go towards the right, except for it's a fractional percent. So for the first digit, the 1 is actually in the 10th position, or tenths position. The 6 is in the hundredths position. The next one would be thousandths, and then 10,000ths and 100,000ths. So first off, let's see if we can write something like this in words. So let's say we had 5.4. Let's just start with something easy. So basically all you have to do is you would read the number that's on the left side of the decimal the way that you always would and write it down. Then we're going to say the word and then write the number on the right hand side just like we normally would, but then tack on its position. Here's what I mean. This would be, the number on the left hand side is just 5, and is our decimal place. We have 4. Now the 4, since the farthest place to the right is this spot, this is the 10th position, so this is 5 and 4 tenths. So we read the number on the left like we normally would, we read the number on the right like we normally would, put the word and in the middle, and then we tack on what the position farthest to the right is. So let's try another one. What if we had, I don't know, okay, so we start with the number on the left side of the decimal, the whole part of the number. So this would be 16 and 45. All right, so we have 16 and 45. So the 5, the place farthest to the right, that'd be the tenths place, the hundredths place. So this would be 45 hundredths. Okay, so we read the number on the left like we normally would, we read the number on the right like we normally would, put the word and in the middle, and the decimal place farthest to the right gets tacked on to the end. So let's try one more. How about all right, do me a favor, hit pause real quick and see if you can write down this number in words. All right, you're back. Let's give it a shot. So the part on the left side of the decimal, that's just a 6. So that would be 6. Decimal point gives us the and. And the number on the right is 123. So 123. Now we got to determine what we add on to the end. Well, if we go down our positions, this is the tenths position, hundredths position, thousandths position. So this would be thousandths position. 6 and 123 thousandths. Okay, so it's just like reading a number like you normally would. The decimal point is the and you have to tack on what the last decimal place to the end is. Now we should also be able to do this in reverse. So if I were to, let's start, I'll leave it there for a second. Let's say if I said 3 and 52 hundredths. 3 and 52 hundredths. Okay, so we knew we got a decimal point. There's the and. So on the left side we have a 3. On the right side we have 52. Now when we write our 52, we want to make sure the number to the right here is in the hundredths place. So it's tenths and hundredths. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky if we were just to change this just a little bit. If I were to say 3 and 52 thousandths, well, it's almost the exact same thing. We'd still have our 3, and we'd have a 52, but the 2 has to be in the thousandths place. So that has to be in the third place, so we have to add a 0 in here. That way the 2 ends up in the tenths, hundredths, thousandths place. All right, so being able to write a decimal as a word and words as decimals doesn't show up as much in society as it used to. Back in the olden days when we had to write checks, this is something you would have to do quite often to write down a dollar value or a decimal as a sentence or as words, and the other way around. All right, let's see what else we might need to be able to do with these decimals. Let's get this out of here. Since we already know how to work with fractions, it would be helpful to learn how to write decimals as fractions. So, all right, so let's just start out with a couple and kind of see how we do this. Let's start out if we had 0.23. So if we were to read this, this would be, well, 0 and 23 hundredths. Well, since it's 0, we generally would just say 23 hundredths here. So by reading it, actually tells you how to write it as a decimal. 23 hundredths. So basically what did we do? We took this right here, we wrote the number without the decimal point on top, and we put the largest decimal place to the right on the bottom. This is the hundredths place, so I put 100 on the bottom. So if I said 0.7, again, reading this kind of tells you what it is. This would be 7/10 or 7/10. Let's try another one. What about if I had 0.567? Again, if we wanted to read this decimal, this would be 567 thousandths. So we would have 567 over 1,000. Now this works when we have a whole part of the number as well. If we have something 1.56, we do the exact same thing. This is 1 and 56 hundredths, so we write the number without the decimal place, 156, and this is in the tenths hundredth spot, so we put 100 on the bottom. All right, let's give this one shot for you. Let's see, how about if I gave you 23.456? Kind of messy looking, but see if you can write that as a fraction. Go. All right, you back? So what do? On the top, or in the numerator of our fraction, we just write down this number. So this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we need to put the denominator, which is going to be the farthest place farthest to the right. So this is the tenths, hundredth, thousandths place. So 1,000 goes on the bottom. Now for a lot of these, well, at least 2 of these, we could reduce these fractions. And of course, we generally do want to reduce our fractions, but we're just kind of in this exercise showing how we go from one to the other. All right, it's going to be a pretty important skill in the future to be able to do this, so make sure that you can. We'll see a little bit later on how we go the other way, how we start out with a fraction and turn it into a decimal. Now, another thing that when we're dealing with decimal numbers, sometimes it's not as easy to see which one's bigger than another. So let's talk about comparing decimals. Comparing decimals. Now, basically what I mean by this, if I gave you 2 sets of decimal numbers like 2.34 and 12.35, and I wanted you to put in one of our inequality symbols, I wanted you to say which number was bigger, how do we do that? Well, all you got to do is you start from comparing these numbers from left to right. Now, if you notice from left to right, as we start with these numbers, in the first position we get to, we get a 1. Now, as long as they're the same, you keep moving to the right. So if you notice we have a 1 here, so they're the same. We have a 2 here, they're the same. We have a 3 here, they're the same. All right, now that we have a different position, that's all we're going to compare. So by looking at these numbers, I'm only looking at these 2 positions that are now different. Which one's bigger? The 5's bigger, so our inequality would go towards that one. That's all you got to do. Start from the left, comparing numbers, and keep going as long as they're the same. As soon as you find a difference, compare those two values and then put in your inequality. So let's say if I had 3.016 and 3.026. All right, which one would be bigger? Well, let's start from left to right. Let's see, the 3's are the same, the 0's are the same. Well, there's a difference, right? So these two are different. So which one's bigger? Well, the one on the right is bigger, so we would put our inequality in. Let's try one more. Let's make it a little more difficult. If I have 1.99, 9 and 1.9. Oop, that's supposed to be 9. 1.99. All right, do me a favor, hit pause and see if you can figure out which one of those two numbers is bigger. All right, if you're back, let's see. As we start comparing, in the ones position we have, well, 1. In the tenths position we have a 9, that's the same. In the hundredths position we have a 9. Now over here we don't have anything, but we could always tack on as many zeros onto a decimal that we want at the end, because those don't mean anything out there. And as you can see, we have a 0 and a 9, so this one would be the bigger. Now you don't have to write the 0 there. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. All right, so when we're comparing decimals, all you do is work from left to right, comparing the position values. As soon as you find a difference, compare those two numbers, whichever one's bigger, that's the bigger number. All right, one more skill that we're going to run into when we have decimals, because decimals can be cumbersome when you have a lot of decimal places. So sometimes we just want to get close to an answer. So let's talk about rounding a decimal. So when we round a number, we're not actually looking at the number, we're getting an approximation of the number, or getting close. Now we've rounded numbers before in the past, so if I had 523 and I said round to the tens spot, remember how we round. Look at the value directly to the right of where you are rounding. Okay, so here I'm rounding to the tenth spot. So this is what I'm trying to round to, the tens. So here I'm actually going to look directly to the right. That's actually the number to the right tells me what I'm going to do with that. If that value is less than 5, so if we look to the right, if that value is less than 5, turn it into, turn all the values to the right of your position. Okay, so as we can see in this case, and we'll get to it in a second, I'm looking at the 2. That's the place I'm trying to round to. So I look to the right. If the number on the right is smaller than 5, what we do is we just turn all the numbers that way 0. So in this case, if we were to round this would be 520. However, let me move this over here so we got a little bit more room. If that value is greater than or equal to 5, greater than or equal to 5, add 1 to your position, making a mess here, add 1 to your position, and then turn all the values to the right into zeros. Okay, so if we had almost the same number, we had like 527. And again, we're told to round to the 10 spot. We would still be looking at the 2. This is where we want to round to. So we look at the number to the right of it. If that number is less than 5, all we do is just change everything to the right of that into zeros. In this case, if the number is greater than or equal to 5, we add 1 to our position, so we change the 2 into a 3, and then everything else is zeros. All right, let's try a couple more of these. Let's see if we had 160. So, and I said round to the just say hundreds place. All right, what if I said round that to the hundreds place? Okay, so what do? Well, we find the hundreds place. Well, there's a 6 in the hundreds place. That's the spot we're rounding to. So we look directly to the right of that position. Is the number directly to the right of that position less than 5 or greater than or equal to 5? Well, in this case, it's greater than 5, so we add 1 to the position we're in, and everything else to the right gets turned into zeros. Now, the good news is, if you remember how to round with whole numbers, kind of like this thing is exactly the same if we're using decimals. So let me give myself a little bit more room. What if I said 16 and 23 hundredths, and I said round to the tenths place? So the rules don't change here. All we do is we look at the place that we're rounding to. So the tens place, there's currently a 2 in that position. So to round to the 2, we got to look to the position to the right of it. So that 3 is going to determine how we round this. So is the 3 greater than 5, greater than or equal to 5, or less than 5? Well, in this case, it's less than 5. So we don't change our number, and we just make everything else zeros. Now, these are called trailing zeros with decimals. Any zeros that are to the right of a number that's not a 0 is actually not necessary. So you could write this, or if you wanted to, you could just write that as 16.2, because that 0 actually isn't doing anything. But it doesn't hurt to write that 0 there if you would like. All right, let's try another one of these. Let's see, what if we have let's do 4. Let's go to the thousandths place. All right, so here we have 16, and I'm sorry, 123 and 1,634 tenths, hundred thousandths, 10 thousandths. So actually all the way down to the 10 thousandths place there. All right, round that to the thousandths place. Go. All right, you done? All right, let's take a look. Our thousandths place, well, there's a 3 currently sitting in the thousandths place, so we're looking 1 space to the right of it. That number is not 5 or bigger, so all we're going to do is just 13.163. Now, if you want to put a 0 there, you can. If you didn't want to put the 0 there, that is also fine. All right, rounding decimals, excuse me, is important a lot of times because decimals can get pretty long and messy, and sometimes we just need to get close to the number. So rounding is always a skill that we're going to want to have. So decimals are now going to come into all of our problems in the future, so we do need to know how to work with them. So in future lectures, we're going to take a look how to do arithmetic with decimals.